He was born and raised in the Flatlands, Chicago, Illinois, a state where the highest structure isn't natural but man-made, Sears Tower. It's the early 80s, close to 1981. Raiders of the Lost Ark was in theaters, MTV had just launched, and Thriller started playing on the radio. He lived in a place where adventure, real adventure, was limited. Although he didn't understand it yet, something inside him stirred. Something inside him longed for more. At 11 that year, he took a family trip to Wyoming, to Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons. Standing at the foot of the mountains, although he couldn't explain it, he felt a calling. He felt a yearning he'd never felt before. In those places, kids often take pictures, buy souvenirs, but for young David, he took something else. A vow to climb to the highest places this world dared to offer, to places where the wind blows cold, where the air is thin, and where, if you spend enough time and listen closely, you can hear God's whisper just a little more clearly. When he became a little bit older and a little bit stronger, he kept that vow. And boy, what a sight to see. His first mountain was in Utah, a day trip, up and down in the same day. But soon he would be climbing mountains that took weeks. Soon he would fly all over the world and experience places most of us only dream about. And he'd learn the spirit of these mountains even better than the locals. Mountains. And I mean mountains like Denali in Alaska, Mount Elbrus in Russia, Carstens in Papua New Guinea, Kilimanjaro in Africa, Cerro Aconcagua in the Andes, Mount Vincent in Antarctica of all places, and of course, Mount Everest. Those mountains are actually called the Seven Summits, the highest mountains in each continent. If that wasn't enough, he then decided to do what no American had ever done before. He decided to climb the 7 volcanic summits, mountains whose summation of altitude is almost just as high. He already had Kilimanjaro and Elbrus, but he added Mount Damavand in Iran, Mount Gilaway in Papua New Guinea, Pico de Orizaba in Mexico, Ojos del Salvo in the Andes, and again to the South Pole, Antarctica, with Mount Sidley. In his adventures, he saw the world, and in it, he learned a little about himself. Although he was called to the skies, he never forgot his family. The mountains made him into a better husband. The mountains made him into a son's hero. And the mountains made him into a man closer to God. That boy from the flatlands kept his vow, and in it turned him into the man God wanted him to be. So, Mr. Roskelley, what got you into wanting to climb the 7 tallest volcanoes in the world?
Oh, well, that's a long story, and it probably goes back to my childhood. But I had a relative who was a big climber, and he'd summited Everest. And I read about him as a when I was a kid growing up in Chicago. And my social media, internet access to the outside world was National Geographic. I'm in my 50s. I don't mind sharing, and things like the internet were unheard of. And being able to research things like that was library. And so I had, we had National Geographic in our home as a kid, and so I would see these big mountains and was just from a young age mystified with the mountains. And of course, growing up in Chicago, we didn't have any. But I started reading books even at a young age about high elevation and summits, and was kind of smitten. But it wasn't until in my 30s that I had enough resources, time, and just kind of the mental grit and patience to be able to do things like this. It takes a lot of patience. So, I would say to answer your question, it goes back to childhood. I've always wanted to been mystified with mountains and always wanted to reach the high point. And in fact, when I look at a new mountain now, I say I want to go there. It's just innate. It's in me. I was born that way.
You were born that way. Yeah, like I was reading about you, listening to some of your history. You grew up in Chicago, and obviously Chicago, Illinois is flat, right?
Yeah,
I
there's no
mean,
mountains there. The highest point is man-made. It's the Sears Tower, now the Willis Tower.
now the Willis Tower. So
Yeah.
when did you first encounter mountains yourself? When did you first do that?
I came out to Utah where I live right at the moment. I drove out to Utah with some friends, probably about when I was 11 or 12, and saw some of the mountains for the first time. I'd been to the back east Appalachian Mountains, and those are beautiful, but they're not really mountains compared to the Western United States, and the Western United States mountains aren't really mountains compared to Nepal or the Himalayas. They're hills. So I would say probably when I was 11 or 12 is when I first saw my real proper mountain.
Did you? So you're 11. You see these mountains. I think you said it was the Tetons. Is that some of
Yeah.
the first
Hmm.
ones?
Yeah. Yeah. And was just blown away. Thought, wow, those are incredible.
So do you think the seed was planted before you saw them? And I think you
Definitely.
said it was. So
Yeah.
you had the seed planted in you as a very young age. You had family members that had
Hmm.
climbed mountains, and then you see them, and then tell me what that felt like. What did that feel like to you?
It just filled some kind of a hole there that it always existed. Like I say, I was born with that natural ability to want to go those places and explore. Sometimes my wife teases me and says I was born in the wrong century. If I was a few centuries ago, I would have been one of the first on the boat with Columbus. You know, I would have been exploring the New World with Magellan. I'm always I just was born with that kind of a spirit to want to explore and see new places.
Yeah, I was actually reading about people that explore, and there's actually a gene that is expressed in some people more than others, and a lot of the new world is dominated by that gene. So perhaps you have some of that genetics
I
in you.
I wouldn't doubt it. I haven't ever tested for it, but I wouldn't doubt that it's there somewhere. I had a great grandfather who came to the United States in about 1850, and he set out from England from Plymouth when he was 15. And so there has to be. I mean, that's a big deal to leave the comfort of the old world and come to the new world. I can only imagine what that had been like for him. At a young age to leave his family and come to the United States, this new world or new land. But yeah, I'm certain whatever genetics is going on with him were passed down to me.
So you're growing up in Chicago, and you have this dream to climb mountains like some of your relatives. When do you take that first climb? When do you climb that first mountain?
Right. So I came out to school. when I was 17. I came out to Brigham Young University in Utah, and one of the first mountains that I climbed was a mountain called Timpanogos, which I live actually really close to today. And that's an over 11,000 foot mountain. I think it's 11,760 feet or something like that. And that's one of the first mountains I climbed, and just enjoyed the heck out of it. Prior to that, I'd been in the mountains but not really properly climbed something per se. So I would say when I was a freshman in college, that would have been one of my first experiences climbing.
Did you do it in one day? Is it like a
Yeah,
several day
it's
hike?
just yeah, you just walk up it. It's a day, as it's quite challenging. But yeah, I just went up it in a day, and loved every bit of it. And from there, I just said, okay, I've got to keep doing this. I knew I couldn't make a living out of doing it per se, but just a very nice hobby, something that I enjoy and brings me joy and peace. So I wanted to do more and more of it.
So you were a freshman in college and you climbed that first mountain. I think you summited the highest peaks in all the continents first,
That's
right?
right.
And then after that you decide to do the seven volcanic summits in the in
That's
in
right.
in the continents. So between your first, I guess, summit was to Russia, right? Mount Elbrus in 2007?
No, it would have been prior to that. I think the first, well, I'd done some other international climbing, but Mont Blanc was one of the first that I climbed. Interestingly enough, there's the seven summits, the traditional summits. But speaking of Elbrus, a lot of people don't recognize that Elbrus is part of Europe. So some people recognize Mont Blanc as the continental high point, and that's in France on the border between France and Italy. And so a lot of people recognize that as the European high point. So I did both of them, just because I'm weird and don't want anybody to say that I didn't do the complete set. And then also in Oceania or Australia, some people recognize the high point as on the Australian continent itself. It's called Kosciuszko. And then most people recognize Karsten's pyramid on Papua New Guinea as the high point of Oceania. So if you look at like continental plates, it's Karsten's, and Karsten's pyramid in Papua New Guinea is much more challenging, much more difficult to climb. So most people do that, but I did both of them. So you could argue that I did like 9 of 7. So the amount of people that have done that is even a smaller amount.
Yeah, that's an incredible feat. I spoke with another mountain climber. She's from Colorado, Laura Clark,
Mhm.
previously, and she sticks to Colorado. She's done like the 100 tallest peaks in Colorado, and that's her jam. That's her drive. She just absolutely loves it. She
Love it.
says she's peaking like 100 times a year. She's climbing a mountain every three,
Yeah.
4 days, something like
I
that.
think she has the same problem that I do.
I
Yeah.
think you're saying, what's your personality like? I think you're a type A. Is that fair to say?
It is. I'm a business owner, and being from Chicago, we're pretty type A, aggressive people. But the West has impacted me, meaning the Western United States, and then also just traveling to Nepal and other countries. It tends to mellow me out. So I've just been in Nepal for about 2.5 weeks, and one of the reasons I love going there is, as North Americans, we tend to get wound up with our phones, technology, commuting, just life in general. And when I go to places like Nepal, it slowly helps calm me down. In fact, I feel stress like up in my shoulders and in my back, upper back. And when I go there, everything just tends to kind of relax. So this is day 2 of me being back in North America, and right now I'm pretty relaxed.
You're
I'm pretty
pretty you're
calm.
pretty chilled out.
Yeah. Yes.
How
Yeah.
long does it take you to get into that relaxed phase when you get to a place like that?
It depends, but I would probably say I started feeling it after about day 7 or 8. And I don't have anything against technology. I use technology to full advantage for business strategy, and it very much helps. But at the same time, it's double edged, because when you're on it all the time and have access to instant information, and people have instant access to you, it just ramps you up. You never really get that time to relax. And so when I go and do a climb, uh, or hike or trekking, it takes a while, but I can slowly feel, the stress start to dial back. But for me, it's also driving, it's commuting in traffic that dials me up as well. So the whole time I was gone, we were gone 2.5 weeks. I didn't drive one vehicle, and it was very, very nice not to drive for a while. So yeah.
Yeah, when I drive places, it can if I'm going over an hour, if there's a lot of traffic, yeah, I do get that stress as
Yeah, I
well.
don't think we recognize it quite right, but driving is stressful, whether we know it or not. It just is. It's inherently stressful. So anything I can do, I'm getting older, and I like to just kind of have less stress in my life. It's better for my heart. And so anything I can do to reduce commute time, work remotely, I certainly give it a try.
You've climbed these mountains. That's a very vigorous activity. How do you stay in shape and prepare for these climbs?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I live in the mountains, but I actively run here all the time. So I am pretty religious with my exercise practices. I'll run 3 or 4 times a week. If I'm training for something, I might a race. I'll amp up my running, but I'll run year round, winter, all 4 seasons. Go to the gym, and then I'm pretty strict with my diet too, which helps, especially as I'm getting older. I'm pretty religious about that, and then sleep too. So I usually try to go to bed every day at the same exact time and wake up at the same time. I think that's better for your health. Um, I'm currently reading a book. I'm just halfway through it, called Outlive, and they talk about all these aspects of lengthening your life. I don't need to live forever by any stretch of the imagination, but anything I can do to have a more comfortable life, continue to have a comfortable life while I'm alive. We just had our first grandbaby about 4 months ago, and so I'm beyond excited. We love him more than our own children, if you can believe somebody would say that. Who would say that? But you want to do everything you can to be around for them and support them. Yeah.
Absolutely. I have 4 kids myself, no grandkids yet.
Mhm.
But I hear that I've heard some parents and grandparents say, "Well, you love your grandkids so much because you don't have to raise them." You know
Yeah,
what
for
I
sure.
mean? You just have to you just have to love them. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
Uh,
It's a very special.
uh, you started in like 2006, 2007. Mont Blanc, I think, was 2006. And you completed all of the 7 summits in 2016, I think, with Antarctica, Mount Vinson.
Yeah, that is correct. Yep. So about 2016, I went to Antarctica for the first time and climbed the high point of Antarctica. It's called Mount Vinson. And then after I finished that, I said, "Hey, what can I keep doing? I want to keep climbing here." So I did a little research and started realizing that no American had climbed the 7 volcanic summits, which is the high volcano on each continent, because volcanoes and mountains form differently. So it's kind of a new challenge that has started here the last little bit. And so I started doing a little more research on that and said, "Oh, this is something for me." And after I contacted a few people and realized if I did this, I'd be the first American. And so I started kind of stealthily moving in that direction. There's not like a body that tracks this. There is an individual in London who keeps track of everybody who's completed the 7 volcanic summits. And so I was able to finish that essentially right before the pandemic in 2020. I went back to Antarctica again and climbed Mount Sidley, which is the high volcano in Antarctica. And that essentially made me the first American to complete the 7 summits and the 7 volcanic summits.
That's
That's
awesome.
awesome.
Were you able to put that in the Guinness Book of Records?
Well, interestingly enough, Guinness is, yes, people have asked that. Guinness is only for firsts, not first American. So I'm
Oh,
not the first person to do it. But I think at the time ooh, I think I was like the 20 something person to complete the 7 summits and the 7 volcanics, first American. Now I think it's up to like 130 or 40. Lately, there's been a lot of Russians completing it. Uh, and in fact, if you want, I can send you the link to the website that tracks all this if you'd like.
yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to see that.
Hmm.
Of all the 7 summits, which one was the most difficult?
Yep, people ask that a lot too. The definitely the most difficult for me was Denali in Alaska. Uh, it's colder, and it's just for me. It was extremely challenging to climb that. I wouldn't have said this probably 10 years ago, but having spent as much time as I have in the mountains, I can't describe it. I don't know how to describe it, but mountains have a spirit and they have a personality, and you can feel it when you're there and when you spend a lot of time in the mountains. Denali is a female spirit, in my opinion, and she does not want people climbing on her, and so she does everything she can to throw people off of the mountain. It's the only one that I had to climb twice. I wasn't successful on my first attempt, and went back the following year and summited. And it was a great experience, a lot of growth for me, but it was very difficult. That was more difficult than Everest for me.
Wow.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think I had read that the first time you went up, someone that you were hiking with became ill and couldn't
That's right.
complete.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and when you're a team, there were three of us. When you're a team, all those team metaphors come to play. But you're only as strong as your weakest link. And if you've got somebody sick, you can't necessarily climb with them and in a safe manner, and you can't leave them behind. You got to stay together. So it was a little frustrating for me because I had planned and trained and done all these great things to get there, and then to have it kind of fall apart. I guess it is what it is. I wasn't that frustrated, but I thankfully went back the next year and was able to summit.
Yeah, I was reading online, and you answered the question already, but I don't know if you know, but in Japanese culture, there's a
Right.
concept called Yama no Kami, the spirit of the
Forest
mountain.
bathing. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I hadn't heard that before, but I actually talk about forest bathing a lot. I don't, have you heard of that concept?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, and I don't know how to say it in Japanese, but there is uh, kind of this concept in Tokyo where, have you been to Tokyo before?
No, sir.
Huge, massive, just lots of concrete, and is a beautiful city. But the doctors will prescribe what's called forest bathing, not going to the woods and taking a bath, but actually going out to nature and spending time in nature in a forest, and you're kind of bathing in the glow of the forest, and it actually is very calming for people and healing, and I firmly believe in that. So the Japanese are onto something. And with what you just mentioned, yeah, there's something to that. I can't describe it, and but it's there. And I don't consider myself a very emotional person, but I can feel the spirit of the mountain when I'm there.
Yeah, they've done studies on where people live and the number of trees per square mile uh, in an area, and there's a statistically significant uh, decrease in stress, basically a calming the more trees they are per square mile. And
I've read that as well. Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah,
And access to open space for sure.
yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, it does something, it does something to us, and it's usually good, I would say.
Yep. So I would say that I'm an advocate for this. Those that are listening that live in a large urban area and you're stressed out, go spend some time in nature, and it won't happen. You know, you have to spend some expended time there. And I always tell people, put your phone away. Don't text while you're out in nature, because it's just it kind of has a counter effect to it. But leave your phone home, put your phone in airplane mode, whatever it happens to be, and just go for a hike, go spend some time in nature, and you'd really be surprised. It lowers blood pressure, and you're just going to feel a lot better.
Uh, I've heard you say that I like suffering. Okay,
Yeah.
what do you mean by that?
Well, that's a good question. I don't necessarily seek it out, but it doesn't necessarily bother me. Um, to be successful as a mountaineer, and you can translate that to other aspects of your life. I think you need to allow some level of suffering into your life, and there's nothing wrong with it. And there's something special about overcoming difficult things. And again, I'm not seeking out suffering. That's not something that I actively am out looking to do. But I think if you're just complacent and everything is fine in your life and you're not really stretching yourself, you're missing some great opportunities for growth. And so in mountaineering especially, there's a whole element of like the weather, for instance, that's completely out of your control, that you can have no control over at all. And you know, when you get foul weather, when you get foul conditions, you just have to kind of embrace it and move forward with it the best that you can. Uh, I, I think there's a tremendous amount of growth that comes from some of that suffering. Mhm.
You said that the mountains are a metaphor for life. What do you mean by that?
You know, climbing teaches you so much about yourself. Um, it teaches you so much about teamwork. Most of the mountains that I've climbed with other people. And so I love that kind of growing together, you know, like a marriage, relationships, being in a family, having children, grandchildren. It really teaches you a lot about yourself. And and who you are as a person. You know, there's really nowhere to hide on the mountain. You're kind of exposed to the elements, to everything, and you know, it just really helps show you who you are. And I like that about the mountains. I like being able to be there and exposed to everything, and just kind of let things happen to you come what may. You know, there's ways to control it and there's ways to prepare for it. But just like life, you have no idea. You know, you could get a phone call tomorrow with a cancer diagnosis, or somebody's had an accident or whatever. You know, you just kind of have to learn to roll with those things in life. It's unpredictable, just like the mountains.
What did you learn about yourself climbing these mountains?
Uh, that's a good question. Um, I'd have to think about that for a little bit, but I think one of the the main things that I really like that I've learned about myself is I'm stronger than I thought I was. That I'm able to endure, and I guess I would define myself as kind of a gritty person. You know, I have a lot of grit and ability to endure, and so I've kind of developed that over the years, which you have to have as a mountain climber. And I think it helps with success in life as well for me as a business owner, to be able to endure. And I think another thing that it's really helped me with is problem solving. So you know, all kinds of problems come at you when you're climbing, and so you just have to be good at solving problems and overcoming adversity. And so as a business owner, every day I'm getting you know, problems that I have to solve, things I have to overcome. And so you know, that kind of harkens back to your original question about mountains being a metaphor for life, but also it crosses over to things that I've learned about myself.
So you're climbing these mountains. A lot of the time you're alone. You don't travel, you're maybe traveling in a group, or a lot of times I would suspect you're alone. Do you experience moments of profound solitude or introspection on these climbs?
Definitely, I would say the majority of the time we're with a team. So this most recent trip that we took, I was with my boys, which was extremely rewarding to spend a lot of time with them. And then I also had some good friends that were with us as well. So there was a group of 8 of us, and I have a daughter-in-law that came with us as well. So we were able to spend a lot of time together, and we trekked to what's called Annapurna Base Camp. They call it ABC. And so you are spending a lot of time with folks, but there is a lot of time on other climbs with, for introspection. I have done a few mountains solo before, and it does. I like, spending time alone. It's generally not super safe in the mountains to climb something by yourself, and so I don't make a habit of it. But I have done that before, and there is a lot of time for just self reflection. And I do like that. I think it's important for people to spend a little bit of time like that on your own, and be able to meditate, to pray, to focus, and really kind of decide who you are as a person. I think that's helpful for sure. A lot of times, I'll bring books along, other study material. I like to keep somewhat organized and a little bit busy when I'm climbing, but mostly I'll bring books along. In fact, here's one that I'm reading right now. It's called The Ascent of Everest. So this is the first. I just had this sitting by me. I read it before I went to Everest. It's a book by John Hunt. So he's the original uh, uh, team leader of the British Everest expedition, where Tenzing and Hillary summited in 1953. So I read that before I left, uh, and now I'm reading it post climbing. And it's really interesting to read back through after I've summited Everest and understand what they went through. Um, yeah.
How is it different now that you read it a second time?
Well, I can put where they are into context more, and Hunt and Tenzing, and especially Hillary. There's a lot of focus on Sir Edmund Hillary in here. Uh, they talk about their emotions, and it's fascinating to read because they haven't summited yet, and so they're talking about what's going to happen, what are we going to find here at the summit. Talking about some of their insecurities and just not knowing what was in front of them. That's fascinating to read about, having been there, and hearing about the weather. So they talk about how the weather, uh, to me, reading their book, it was a lot more snowy, and the conditions were a lot more difficult than they are today. And I think some of that is just with weather changes that we've experienced on the planet. You can call it global warming, whatever you want to call it, but the weather definitely has been changing the last 50 years. And so that was one thing that stood out to me that I noticed quite a bit in reading that.
So when you climb a mountain, there are different parts of it. Obviously, the preparation, the reaching base camp, the ascent, and then the summit, and then the descent. More or less is kind of how I picture it.
Mhm.
Is there a favorite part of that whole process for you?
Well, that's a good question. I enjoy all of it. Uh, it's interesting in reading a lot about mountains and just reading about, I'm an environmental engineer, so I read risk assessments a lot and look at things from a safety standpoint. And if you look at the data for most climbs, most of the accidents happen on the descent, not the ascent. And so you have to be really careful. I think what happens for a lot of people is they reach the summit, that is the ultimate for them, and then they let their guard down, And I think that's one of the reasons why most of the accidents happen on the descent, especially on Everest, because everybody's used all their energy to get to the top, and then they don't leave anything in the tank to come back down. And so when they're coming down, they just don't have a lot of energy, and they'll make a bad decision, or they'll slip because they're completely worn out and exhausted, which is understandable, and they fall. So of course, I love the summit and being at the top, but at the same time, I realize you're only halfway there. You got to get back down, and I don't really relax until I'm actually home. I step off the airplane at the airport here in Salt Lake, and just that's when I completely relax. I'm home. I've made it back successfully, and I'm more and more comfortable. But yeah, it's I love getting to the top, and then I love coming down, and but I love the climb too. So it's a great question, and I can't say there's one over another. And like on Everest, you're only at the summit for about 40 minutes. That's about how much time I spent at the top. But I could argue that it's my entire life that I've been preparing to get to the summit. So it's the culmination of just so much effort and so much support from family, and then getting to the summit, realizing your goal, and then coming down. I love it all. It's just wonderful. Yeah.
So, after you return from a climb back home to Salt Lake with your family, what's your first comfort or indulgence?
It was funny at Annapurna. Uh, my boys kept talking about what were some of the first things they wanted to eat on the way home, and so I don't mean to endorse one place over another, but they kept talking about wanting to go to Five Guys and eat a hamburger. So literally the very first thing we did on the way home was we all stopped for big cheeseburgers. That's kind of the American way, right? But the uh, going to Everest and base camp is primarily Buddhist, and going to Annapurna is primarily a Hindu endeavor. And Kathmandu is way more Hindu than Buddhist, and of course they don't believe in eating meat, and so we didn't have a tremendous amount of meat while we were climbing, and so I think that's why they were really craving some hamburgers. So, but it usually involves food, because when you're climbing, you're losing weight. In fact, when I was at Everest, I came home about 20 pounds lighter, and I'm not a huge person, but I lost about 20 to 25% of my body weight. And so I remember coming back from Everest, and I spent a good month trying to put weight back on, because you just burn so many calories. And I remember on Everest dreaming about food from back home, and what I was going to eat when I got back home. So you do talk about it, and it's funny to read books on shipwreck, or books on people that go on these big adventures, and frequently the discussions will get to what are they going to eat when they're saved. And there must be something to that, with kind of slowly starving when you're climbing a mountain like that, that causes you to be thinking about things like that. So,
Do
yeah.
you know? Do you know where that calorie use it come? Why are you
Yeah.
burning so many calories? Is it because you're just climbing the entire time? Is your metabolism a lot higher? What?
Yeah. Well, for starters, we weren't engineered, however you want to say it, as humans to live above, 16,000 feet. Our bodies just are not meant to be there. So part of it is just living in that oxygen deficient atmosphere. It burns a lot of calories, and then being in the cold burns a tremendous amount of calories as well, just your body trying to keep warm. So when you're in the death zone on Everest, which is above about, give or take, 25,000 feet, uh, you're burning, they say on average, 30 to 40,000 calories in a 24-hour period. It is so stressful on your body. And it's unfortunate, but your body it starts burning muscle. It doesn't burn fat. I'd love it if it burned the fat, but it wants the muscle. So I theorize it took about a pound from each side of my chest. and then it took about a pound and a half from each side of my buns. They're just big muscle, right? So even to this day, my pants don't fit like they used to. I lost a lot of high muscle on my cheeks, on my derriere, and so it took probably 5 pounds of muscle off of me just surviving, because you can't possibly eat 30 to 40,000 calories of food in a 24-hour period. And so anything you put in your body just holds on to it, you know, because you're dying. You're literally dying. That's why they call it the death zone.
So when you summit and you're standing at a summit, what's going through your mind? Is there triumph, humility, reflection? Is there a theme on what goes through your mind when you're at the summit?
I think every mountain's different, but you do get a cross section of what you just described. I personally, I think I've spoken on this before. If you don't see the hand of a creator standing at the summit of something like that, I'm not sure you're human. It's incredible to be up there. I'm very humbled when I stand at the summits of mountains because they're so massive, and I see the hand of my creator. I see a higher power in helping me achieve my goals. I never would say it was me on my own. That's nonsense. I'm getting help from family, friends, and certainly from my creator, from the hand of deity when I summit these things. So it's incredibly humbling for me. If you read your Bible, there's plenty of or Quran or other holy books. There's lots of examples of individuals going to the mountains to commune with a higher power, and there's something about it. So yeah, I love it. It's incredible to go up there. I'm energized. Even though I'm exhausted, I'm still energized when I get to the summit of something. It's incredible. I just love it. It's very addictive. But you can imagine how far you can see at the summit of Everest, and we had just perfect weather. So to the north of the summit, I climbed from the Nepal side, but the Tibet side, you can see for hundreds of miles. It's just incredible. In fact, I'll never forget. Uh, we summited about 7:30 in the morning on May 19th, and so my anniversary of summiting is coming up in about a week. In fact, you'll probably see Everest summiters here in the next. There have been some summiters so far. This is the Everest season right now where people are summiting. But uh, I watched the sunrise from give or take about 5:30, 5:40 in the morning, and it starts with this low glow, and it's incredible. You can actually see the curvature of the planet because you're up so high with the glow, and then the sun comes up. It's just amazing to see the views from up there. It's beautiful.
I can't imagine. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been to the tops of, small mountains, I guess you can call them, and it's gorgeous up there. Top of
Uh-huh.
Everest has to be
Guys,
otherworldly.
yeah, and especially, we were so fortunate to have just perfect weather. We had a breeze, maybe gusts to 5 miles an hour, just and unlimited visibility. I realized we just had we were blessed so much with perfect weather up there. It was still cold, 20, 25 below zero is a kind of a guess. But as far as conditions on the summit goes, we were very fortunate.
Are there is there a ritual you do when you summit these mountains? Is there something you do?
Sometimes I'll sing. At the summit of Everest, we summited with uh, our Sherpa. His name was Tile Nuru, and he had a long uh, uh, set of prayer flags. And before I knew it, I felt something tapping on my head, and I don't know what he was doing, but there was a little breeze, and he had this I don't know, maybe it was 20 or 30 prayer flags tied together in a string. And I turned around and looked, and he was tapping my head, saying some kind of a prayer. And then he let it go in the wind. It was a really cool sight. So I don't know what kind of blessing he was giving me, but that was kind of a cool thing that happened on the summit of the mountain there. But usually, if I'm climbing with other people, which is usually the case, there's lots of hugs, lots of congratulations. Sometimes I'll make a phone call. Sometimes I won't. It just depends on where I am. Specifically on Everest, they said don't call home, and we had satellite phones to be able to do that. But the reason they say don't do that is for a lot of people they'll let their guard down. You call home, I've made it, and there's elation, which is wonderful. But then people let their guard down, and remember what I said earlier about falling on the descent, and I didn't want that to happen. So they specifically, our team lead said, I recommend not calling home. He didn't forbid it, but we didn't. I had a tracker so my wife could see me summiting, and I sent that tracker to a bunch of friends so people could see me summit. But they knew I was standing on the top. In fact, we started at about 7:30 in the evening from Camp 4, which is the South Call, and summited about 7:30 in the morning. So more or less, it took about 12 hours. But unbeknownst to me, the tracker had frozen, and so there was no tracking for 6, 7 hours, and then all of a sudden the sun warmed it up on the summit and it pinged and you could see us at the summit. So there was a lot, it was a lot of elation.
I bet
Yeah.
you your family was worried in that time. They're like, what's going on? It stopped,
There
you
there
know?
was some concern. Yes, there was definitely some concern. Hmm.
Many people struggle to find purpose or meaning. Do you think climbing is your way of pursuing purpose, or does it serve a different function in your life?
I'm going to say it does help give me some purpose. I love it. It brings me tremendous joy. And I just absolutely love it. Lots of other things give me purpose in life, though. So it isn't my complete existence. I love my family and I spend a lot of time with them. Most recently, the last 5 or 10 years, I've tried to intermix both of them. So I'll climb with my boys, and that's very enjoyable for me. We've summited quite a few mountains together. My boys and I climbed Kilimanjaro together, which was a phenomenal experience. But I also like service, so I like to serve others, and that, believe it or not, that gives me more purpose, and I feel better about serving others than even my climbing. So that should tell you a little bit something about how important service is for me. When my kids were younger, for 6 or 7 spring breaks, we would go down to Mexico and build homes for those that are less fortunate. And when I look at pictures of what we accomplished, over the course of like a week, we'd we'd show up at somebody's home and they'd literally be living in a cardboard box. And so a big team of us, there'd be like 6, 7, 8, 9 families. There'd be probably 50 of us. We'd kind of clean the site, lay a concrete pad, and build a small, modest home for individuals. And it was just so rewarding to see what we accomplished in a week. So when I do something like that, and especially combining that with my family, that gives me more purpose than even climbing.
I've done Habitat for Humanity. Have you?
Love it. Same
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yep.
Mhm.
Way to go. And those that are listening, you should be doing more of that. Yeah. You want to find some purpose in life, serve others. Get out of yourself, and go serve others. It will solve a whole bunch of problems that you think you may have in your life. Go serve those that are less fortunate. Yeah.
What role does faith, if any, play in your decision making on these expeditions?
That's a really good question. And as I alluded to earlier, I absolutely have faith in God and faith in a higher power, in deity. And I, I'll say it this way: I have no death wish whatsoever. I have no problem if the weather is sour, if the conditions don't feel right. I'd turn around and come back down. Um, I have, again, no desire to die. Doing this. This is a hobby for me, and I have lots of other things to do in my life. So yes, yeah. My wife is here reminding me that my faith plays a huge part in my life. It absolutely does. Thank you. The boss is here. She's giving me some cues.
Yeah, the boss is overlooking now. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. No, it does. It's a huge part of my life. Absolutely. Mhm. You know, my wife has been such a tremendous support to me throughout my life, and just supporting me and helping me, you know, do these things that I'd be remiss if I didn't speak about her helping me with these. Yeah, and that's true. She just reminded me, and I did know this. Monday is our 30th anniversary for, you know, being married. And what's interesting is um, her. This will tell you something about her. May 18th is her birthday, and May 19th is our wedding anniversary. So, interestingly enough, we summited Mount Everest on May 19th in Nepal, May 18th here in Utah. So not only was I gone for her birthday, but I was gone for our wedding anniversary. So, but we, you know, we summited. So so now we usually will have like a dinner, and we usually go. I summited Everest with a really good friend of mine. His name's Steve Pearson. So we usually will have a dinner with our spouses and reminisce, and you know, just kind of have fun celebrating. And I have a flagpole in front of my house, and we're usually flying the American flag, but I usually put the Nepal flag up right now. So that for the week leading up to our anniversary, the Nepal flag is flying.
Oh, that's awesome. What's the weirdest or most unexpected thing you've seen or heard on the mountain?
Um, a few things. If you've heard of Yetis before, have you heard of a Yeti? I
Yes.
did not see one, but when you're trekking in the Khumbu region, is what it's called. There's one particular village where you can go see a Yeti scalp, and so I guess it's supposed to be the scalp of a Yeti, and you go into this old monastery, and one of the monks will show it to you. It's in a glass box. It's pretty fascinating to see. Uh, I think it's in Pengboche Monastery. Somebody can double check me on that, but it's there. I've actually seen it. It's behind a locked door, and you know, you can make a little donation. They'll let you take a look at it. But in talking to people in that region, talking to, you know, at least three or four people, they actually had seen Yetis before, and they were as serious as a heart attack. These are just, you know, this wasn't like some panel discussion on Yetis. These were just random people that I talked to at base camp and other locations. These are local Nepali people that live in that Khumbu region, and they described seeing Yetis, which is just fascinating to me.
Do
Just
they
like
describe them like I picture them like these large, kinda like Bigfoot that are white and gray?
No, they're a little smaller, and you know, definitely humanoid, but a little smaller. And the one story I remember in particular, one of the guys said when he was younger, a little kid, his family tended yaks, and he described a Yeti coming over the side of a ridge, grabbing a baby yak and running away with it, presumably to
Wow.
eat it. So, and he was extremely serious about it. You know, I'm kind of making a little bit light of it, but he was very serious about it. And, you know, that wasn't expected. The other thing that has come up in all of my climbing around the globe and everywhere that I've gone, it's really fascinating. Local people will talk about how the weather and climate is changing every single mountain that I've been on. So when we climbed the high volcano in Papua New Guinea, PNG as they call it, my youngest son Riker was with me, and we were, I think we were about 13,500 feet, and that was the final camp before we went for the summit. And the the one of the guides that was with us actually is one of the property owners, and that he owns the property that the mountain's on. And we were sitting there around the campfire, and we looked up at this flower that was growing off of a tree. And he said, when I was a kid, you know, maybe he's in his 40s, he said, when I was a kid, we would never get flowers this high up the mountain, that particular type of flower. And he said, now they're growing. Or at Kilimanjaro, you hear them talking about glaciers melting that used to not melt before. And other mountains, people have all said the same thing. So it's fascinating to me how people are talking about, uh, the planet warming up, and unsolicited. They just have talked about it.
For you, what's the hardest thing about climbing, and how do you overcome it?
I think one of the most difficult aspects of it is just being away from my family, being away from home. I'm very involved as a father, and my kids are all grown now. My youngest is 22. He's 21, but they're college students, and they're two of my boys are married, and so they're kind of transitioning. They're learning to adult, as I say. So it's not as difficult to be away from them as it was when they were younger. That was very difficult, to be here and then just put all that burden on my wife. But I like to be involved in their lives. I like to be here. I don't want to be an absent dad. So that's hard for me to be away from them. So at Everest, uh, I would call home every morning. It's 12 hours different from Utah, the time change. So I would call home essentially every morning about 9 a.m., which would be 9 p.m. in Utah. And we'd kind of go around the room and, how was your day? How are you guys doing? And then we'd have a prayer together as a family. So that was a nice aspect of it, and that allowed me to kind of have some involvement. So dad wasn't just gone for a couple months and not part of their lives.
Yeah, that I would see that as being pretty difficult, especially having a young family
Yep.
and you're out
Hmm.
here and, you're climbing those mountains but I'll bet you those boys were so proud of their dad
Yeah.
when they found
Yeah.
out what he's doing, you know?
Yep. And that it's transitioned for them into active lifestyles. They like climbing, doing things outdoors, and I am very proud of who they've become as adults.
Some people feel called to the mountains. Some feel like they are an escape from something in their lives. Which one would you describe yourself?
Well, I definitely love my life, and so there's nothing to escape from. I love it, but I also love climbing. So I of those two statements, I would say I was called to the mountains. Um, if I could do it full time, I would spend as much time as I can in the mountains. In fact, like I showed you earlier, I live in the mountains, so it just brings me more peace being in the mountains. I love it. Yeah. We're the beehive state. That's our state motto. In fact, I keep bees. I
I
have
think
two
I read
beehives.
that.
Yeah.
You're like a beekeeper.
Yeah. I love my bees. My wife calls them my babies. And so they're very relaxing to me. In fact, this isn't necessarily why I keep bees, but Sir Edmund Hillary was a beekeeper as well. And
Really?
yeah, he loved his bees. You can Google that fun fact. But yeah, he kept bees. So, and I'll talk bees all day. I'm almost as passionate about bees as I am the mountains. But interestingly enough, beekeepers as a population, as a cohort, live longer than others, and they theorize it's because of three things. One, consuming the honey, which is very good for you. Uh, Two, just caring for something. If you have plants or an animal or gardens, or children, I think you tend to live longer because you're taking care of something. And then three, the stings. So if you get stung a couple, two, three times a year, they say it's actually healthy. It can be medicinal for you. Of course, if you're not allergic to bees, then it's not good for you. But from a health standpoint, if you can build up some tolerance, there's some health aspects to it. So.
If you could only climb one of the mountains again, as many times as you wanted, uh, which one would it be and why?
Ooh, that nobody's asked me that question before. That's a good question. Uh, I probably would say Kilimanjaro. I've done it twice. It's a favorite, and I mostly like it because I've always done it with family and friends, and it's just so relaxing and enjoyable. It's you climb generally. You can climb from Kenya, but most people climb from Tanzania, and it's just a beautiful area of the world. and the people are so incredibly friendly. It's just a beautiful mountain, and it's very laid back. Um, you know, you hear a lot of people, they say pole pole, like go slow, slow, go very slow. So they'll say that to you, and then of course they say Hakuna Matata, just like they say in The Lion King. It's just a friendly place to go. I like. And then after you climb Kilimanjaro, then you go on safari. So you go see all the animals. It's just a great experience. And in fact, I encourage people, if they have the means and want to start into international climbing, I'd say Kilimanjaro is a great one to start on. Any reasonably fit person can summit Kilimanjaro.
I think I saw a documentary, or they made a documentary of these people that climbed it, and they were from young kids and they were to some elderly folks. And I
Yeah.
guess it's a slow
Yep.
ascent.
Yep. Yeah. Over 5, 6, 7 days. When we climbed it, my youngest, my son, my youngest, he was 12 at the time. He was among the youngest foreigners to climb the year that we did it, 2016. In fact, I had to sign some documents, but he could climb as long as he was with a parent, and he did great. You know, in fact, out of our group, he was the first to summit. He
Oh,
did
wow.
incredible. Yeah. Those young people just bound right up stuff.
I've climbed a volcano myself in
Oh,
Nicaragua. It's
oh,
called
I know. Yeah,
Ometepe.
yeah, I know what
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah, it's
That's
in the
cool.
middle. It's in the middle of a lake. It's, if you look at it on Google Maps, it looks like a figure eight. It's gorgeous. Just these two perfect looking volcanoes, and you can climb, like, people climb Ometepe. That's when I climbed, and it was a day trip. So we climb up, and it was me, my brother-in-law, and like a nephew. So we're climbing up it, and and it was difficult. It was, for me, it was very, I was in my, I guess, early 30s. Uh, and we're going up there, and I'm taking breaks, and we're making it all the way up. And there were these teenagers
No.
that are just running up the mountain. You know, they are just passing us up. We're doing our darndest just to make it to the top of this thing, and these kids are just flying up there.
I frequently say youth is wasted on the youth.
All that energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to the top, and it was, I mean, you're up in the clouds. It had what is it called? The caldera,
The
or is when,
caldera. Yeah.
yes. And
Yep.
it was green. It was like a large football field size, and it was not active. So there were trees, and then there was a lake right in the middle
Yeah.
with like a coast of greenery.
Oh, that's nice.
And no one lives up there. No one lives up the mountain. So you're kind of in the sky, and the clouds would blow into like the bowl, and then wind would come, and they would all blow out and clear. And I was telling, my brother-in-law, is like, if gnomes existed, they would live
That's where they
here.
would live. Yeah.
Like if I saw a gnome, I wouldn't have been surprised. It was like
That's
incredible.
funny.
A lighthearted question. So for a vacation, what do you prefer to go to the mountains or to the beach?
Oh, definitely mountains. Yeah. There's no question. And my wife, what would you say, Linda? Mountains or beach for vacation?
It depends on which mountain and which beach, honestly.
Oh,
Sorry.
I was just asking my wife because she's next to us here, but usually she likes the cooler weather, so I think we like to go to the mountains more
Mm,
than, yeah.
then
But
the beach.
I'm fine. I can go to Hawaii and enjoy the heck out of that too.
You can get both in Hawaii, can't you? The mountains and
You
the beach.
can, and I've done that before. Yeah. Yeah. I've been there when there's been snow on the summit of Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea on the Big Island, which is fascinating. And I've been to the summit of both of those as well.
Wow. Oh
Yeah.
man, that's got to be gorgeous.
Well, some argue that Mauna Kea is the tallest in the world because if you take it to the sea floor, it's like 30,000 feet. So I got that one because some people have said, "Oh, you didn't get to the high point." Yes, I did.
Okay.
And then, interestingly enough, have you heard of a mountain called Chimborazo in Ecuador?
No, I haven't heard it. Heard of
So
it.
Chimborazo is the high point of Ecuador, and it's really close to the equator. And I can't completely explain the phenomenon, but if you think of the Earth as a sphere, it's not completely a sphere. It actually bulges at the equator. So the summit of Chimborazo, even though it's 20,000 feet, 20,300, I can't remember exactly what it is. It's closer to the sun than Everest is to the sun.
Really?
Yes. So I've climbed that as well because I don't
Wow.
want people saying, "Oh, you didn't." Yeah. Da, 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 da." So we've climbed down there as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. See here, got a couple more questions.
Mhm.
If you could go back and talk to your younger self when you first saw the mountains and had dreams about climbing them, what would you say to yourself?
Did you hear that question, Linda? What do you think? I'm asking my wife. That's a good question. Nobody's asked that before either. What do you think?
I just think you had a mature perspective as a young person, and you immediately said, I got to go to the top of that mountain when you came to the Rockies. And that's just perpetuated.
I don't know if I'd want to talk to my younger self.
You wouldn't listen anyway.
I wouldn't
Fair.
listen. I wouldn't have listened. I
Uh-huh.
would have said, "Who are you, old man? Get out of here."
True.
I'll do it myself. I'll figure it out on my own. So,
What advice would you give yourself?
I don't think I would have listened when I was younger, even if it was myself. I don't. I
You
don't.
talking you now. Like
Oh,
you're
what? Yeah,
talking, what would you tell yourself? I
I
know this
don't.
is uncomfortable. You don't
Yeah,
like
I
talking
don't.
about your emotions.
Yeah, I don't know what I would say to myself. I'm very happy with who I am and how I've turned out, and I don't know. That's a great question. I'm gonna have to think on that. You've stumped me. Most of the time I have answers. So way to go. You've managed to stump me. I don't have a good answer for what I would say to myself. That's why I was turning to the boss.
Mm.
What do you think, Linda?
He's stumped me. No one ever stumps you. So
Yeah, my wife is joking, saying nobody ever stumps me. I always have an answer for something. So I'm giving you a thumbs up.
Okay. Okay, I have another question. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. So you have 3 sons,
Hmm.
right? Sometimes people climb these mountains and don't make it back. I think
Right.
you've had relatives that have died on the mountain.
Definitely friends.
Friends,
Hmm.
okay. Let's say you were to have climbed one of these mountains and you didn't make it back. There was some accident and you died. What would you want your family to remember about you, specifically your sons?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. I can answer that. So I would hope that I've instilled enough of myself in them. I'd want them to be honest, upstanding individuals. I'd want them to work an element of service into their lives. And I just would want them to be happy. I wouldn't want them to mourn or have any issues with me being gone. They're old enough now that if for some reason something happened to me, I guess it is what it is. But I want to live a long, fruitful life. I don't want to go anywhere.
you put them first and love them.
Yeah, I think that's my wife is giving me some good feedback. I'm glad she's sitting here. Just knowing that I put them first and that I love them. But it's a great question, and it definitely comes up from time to time. And doing things like this where you can die, it does, it does give you pause. And my wife and I have had these types of discussions in the past. Even discussions about where would you want to be buried? But it does cause you to have those kinds of discussions when you're doing things like this. You never know what life's going to throw at you.
Well, I've been reading up about you. I read your website, listened to your podcast. You're an inspirational person. I I find great inspiration in the things that you've done, the way that it sounds that you live your life, the way you put family first, the way you see a challenge and are motivated by it, and actually completing those challenges that you face successfully and with humility, and finding purpose and finding inspiration and finding life lessons uh, in all that you've done. I think it's a wonderful story to me. It sounds like a full life that anybody, I feel, that has lived that can say that they've lived a full life. And I think a lot of us can get inspiration and hopefully take a small bit of what you've done and what you've accomplished and make our own lives better. So, Dave Roskelley, I thank you for being with me today. Thank you for your time. And
Absolutely. Happy to do those very kind words of you. And I'm going to leave you with a namaste, which is a traditional greeting in Nepal. And I like it because essentially what it means is the goodness in me recognizes the goodness in you. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be with you today. I appreciate your time and your very kind feedback. And I do hope that I inspire others. That's another reason why I do what I do. So I hope that people listening are inspired by my message. Thank you.
very good. Thank you.
Okay.